everybody, and welcome back to Social Studies in Isolation. Today we are finishing up the last and final round of Mustache Madness. Hopefully everybody still has a little bit of interest left in this as we do the last two people. So we are moving into the championship here. We have two people left here after the voting came through. So the number one seed, Theodore Roosevelt, is still alive, and the number two seed, Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi's was actually a 50-50 split with Mark Twain, so I had to be the tie-breaking vote here. So we're moving on with Gandhi. So Roosevelt and Gandhi are the last two. As usual, I ask that you do vote to at least get us a winner in Mustache Madness here. So let's get going here. So Theodore Roosevelt, we focused on kind of his adventurous side of things. We focused on his military. Last thing we'll talk about is his presidency a little bit more. We already did the foreign policy, but what did he do domestically? Theodore Roosevelt is a Republican candidate that runs for office, and he is going to be very well known for the square deal. So Theodore Roosevelt is very much going to come forth in a time where he feels that big business is running the country and has no control at all. This is known as the Gilded Age. It was shiny on the outside. It looked like everything was great because the country is very wealthy, but the poor and the working class is struggling. And so Roosevelt comes to office and says, I'm not going to make it equal for everybody, but I'm going to make sure it's a square and fair deal for everybody. So there's three pieces of this. First piece is the conservation of natural resources, which we already talked about. He sets aside 194 million acres of land for the government to set up national parks, which is 5 times more than all of his predecessor presidents before him. So he gets that set up. The second big thing he's going to do is he's going to try and control some of these big corporations. These big corporations of oil and steel and different industry and coal and industries have basically come along and they've taken complete control over the industry. And they do whatever they want to. They charge whatever prices they want to, and they go around and they pay people whatever they want to, which is usually pretty low. And so he is going to become known as Trust Busting Teddy. What that means is he wants to bust up these corporations that have basically created a trust to control the entire industry. And so Theodore Roosevelt is going to do his best to take apart a lot of these trusts and make sure that there's not one company controlling an entire industry, and also to help boost labor up as well. So throughout his trust-busting Teddy time period, he takes suits against 43 major corporations. So one example of this is the coal industry. The coal workers have terrible working conditions. It's not very safe. It's not healthy. It's long hours. It's not good. And they're not getting paid anything for it in addition to this. And so they want to go on strike. And usually in the past of this time period is labor just basically was out of luck. The government usually swooped in to protect the corporations. Well, Theodore Roosevelt is going to take labor and going to take corporate leaders and is going to sit them down together and basically hash this thing out to make sure that everything works out. And so they don't get huge gains, but they are going to get some modest pay hikes for the coal workers, which is a big deal because never in history has a president intervened in a labor intervention like this to actually help out the labor force. So he's going to do this 43 different corporations across his time. Then the last thing then is the consumers. How is he going to help the consumers? So he wants to make sure that everybody can go and buy a car, go buy some meat or go buy bread or fruit or whatever and feel safe about what they are buying. And so he is going to create a number of things that are going to protect the consumers. One example of this is with meat. So Upton Sinclair has written The Jungle, and The Jungle is a book that talks about the terrible things happening in the meat packing industry. So for instance, all of the old, spoiled, rotten meat would be taken back to the factory and it would be tossed into the sausage bin. And then if there'd be rat feces that would be swept into the sausage bin, and dead animals could be pushed in there. Even people, if they got their finger chopped off, they could just push that in there. So the sausage, for instance, is this disgusting conglomeration of all these terrible things, and nobody's monitoring it or keeping track of it. And so he creates the Meat Inspection Act that's going to do this. So the Pure Food and Drug Act is going to be created. So Teddy Roosevelt's going to do his best to make sure that people can feel safe buying food or buying whatever these items are. So he's going to protect the consumers as well. Well, eventually Teddy Roosevelt's term ends and he's going to move on and he's going to step down. He's going to leave as president. And William Howard Taft is going to take over for him. And Roosevelt and Taft initially get along, but as time goes, some animosity is created and the two do not see eye to eye. And so Theodore Roosevelt wants to take over. So he tries to get the Republican nomination from Taft. It doesn't work. And so Roosevelt doesn't give up, though. Instead, he creates a third party to run against Taft. So it's known as the Progressive Party, or later the Bull Moose Party, named for Theodore Roosevelt, who was the bull moose, the strong, sturdy, strong as a bull moose. And so Theodore Roosevelt and the progressives are going to run against William Howard Taft unsuccessfully. Basically, what happens is that all the Republican voters split their votes between Taft and Roosevelt, and so neither of them win. And instead, Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, is going to become victorious as a result of this. And this is largely the end of Roosevelt's stint, but it is the most successful third-party campaign in history. One last thing to kind of cover, just because I think it's fascinating, and I might have shared this before, but you get to hear it again if I have. During this campaign, he is giving a speech in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and this tells you about everything you need to know about Roosevelt. He's giving this speech, and there's an assassination attempt that takes place. So John Fleming Schrank is going to shoot him, and he shoots him right in the chest. And luckily for Roosevelt, he had his speech that was folded in half and his glasses case in his pocket. And so the bullet goes through the speech and through the glasses and slows it down enough that he's going to live through this. So he takes the hit. It is lodged inside of him. He basically takes a minute to calm the crowd, tells the police to arrest the guy. And then after he's taken his minute, then he continues and he gives a 90-minute speech with blood coming out of his shirt and a bullet lodged in his chest. And only after finishing his campaign speech does he go to the hospital. They eventually do the work on him, get him cleaned up. They don't take the bullet out. They actually leave the bullet in there for the rest of his life. He's going to live with this bullet in there. And so this, in my opinion, kind of tells you a little bit about Roosevelt and the character that he was. So that's Roosevelt. And then he squares off against the other side, which is Mohandas Gandhi. So we've talked a lot about him, and you understand kind of his idea of civil disobedience. Peacefully break the law over and over until you accomplish what you want to accomplish. So he's pushed this into India, and he's fighting for independence against Britain. And kind of towards the end of this movement, like we said, he's gotten huge amounts of support, thousands and thousands of followers. Some of the big things, probably the biggest thing, is going to be his Salt March. So this is a good example. They're not allowed to they're not allowed to make their own salt in India. They have to buy it from Britain, just like they have to buy everything else from Britain. Even though it's very easy for them to get their own salt by basically going to the Indian Ocean, taking the salt water, evaporating the water, you have salt. And so Gandhi says, this is Indian salt. We should be able to harvest it and do what we want. And so he is going to start what's known as the Salt March. He and thousands of other people go on a 240-mile march to the Indian Ocean. And what they're going to do is they're going to go there, they're going to collect water, get the salt out of it, and then sell this salt to all sorts of different people. This is 100% illegal. They're not allowed to do any of this. They can't sell salt. They can't produce the salt. But the British look at this and say, well, what do we do? Do we arrest thousands and thousands of people? So at this point, they know it doesn't work to arrest Gandhi. It just makes even more people fired up about it. So this example of the Salt March, and then more and more things beyond this, get to a point where eventually the British say, we're done, we're out, we can't deal with this. It's too expensive, it's too much unpopular opinion around the world. And so they are going to decide we do need to give independence to India. So this then marks Gandhi's kind of final chapter then. Once you're given independence, what's going to happen? Well, the big problem in India is there's two groups that exist, two main groups. There's other ones as well. But the two main groups you have the Hindus and you have the Muslims. And Hindus and Muslims all hate the British, but they really don't like each other very much either. Britain's hatred up here, hatred for each other here. So if Britain's going to leave, you're going to have Hindus and Muslims in the same country that really don't get along with each other. And so Britain's solution to this is to separate them. So they're going to partition India into separate countries. So you'll have India, where the Hindus go. Up here you'll have Pakistan, where the Muslims will go. And then on the other side you'll have East Pakistan that eventually becomes Bangladesh. And then there's a Kashmir region as well. But really it's India and Pakistan. And then all the Muslims should go live in Pakistan. All the Hindus should go live in India. And then they'll be separate and they'll all be fine. The problem is they all live intermixed. And so as this mass exodus takes place of Hindus trying to get to India, Muslims trying to get to Pakistan, you have all sorts of violence and riots and killings that break out. And Gandhi is just distraught. He says, this is everything I fought for was peace and nonviolence. And here we are killing each other after we've gotten rid of the British. And so he is going to spend the remainder of his life fighting to protect all these groups. He, especially being a Hindu, is going to push to protect Muslims. He actually decides that a Muslim should be in charge of India to kind of create a balance and keep the country as one big India. No Pakistan, India, just India. And so he fights the rest of his life, and he's actually going to upset his Hindu followers as well. And eventually, at a pretty old age, while he's going off to prayers, he is going to be assassinated. He is going to be shot in the chest. He unfortunately did not have a speech and glasses in his pocket like Roosevelt did. No, so Gandhi is shot in the chest and he dies, actually killed by a Hindu extremist that felt he was being too kind to the Muslim populations. To show his impact of what he did, his funeral procession included over 2 million people spread out over 5 miles, showing just the vast impact that he had on the entire world. So Gandhi is one of the most influential people in world history. Roosevelt, huge impact in American history. Both of them big figures in the historical scheme. And so you have to decide which one you think is going to be the winner of our Mustache Madness competition. So remember, and one more time, ask you to get out there and vote. We can decide who our winner is going to be. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, have a great day, and make sure to tune in next time for some more social studies in isolation.